Jury selection is nearly complete in the federal sex crimes trial of Sean Diddy Combs, and it has been an eventful week. One juror admitted to doom-scrolling memes, another was too tired from binge-watching Andor, one had even worked with the judge. I'm going to talk with our very own Law and Crime reporter Elizabeth Millner to break down what to expect on the final day of jury selection and what's ahead in this highly anticipated trial. Welcome to Sidebar, presented by Law and Crime. I'm Jesse Weber. Jury selection entered its third day yesterday on May 7th in the high-profile sex crimes trial of Sean Diddy Combs as prosecutors and defense attorneys officially narrowed down a pool of 45 potential jurors. Now, the final panel will decide the fate of the 55-year-old music mogul who faces charges of sex trafficking, racketeering, transportation to engage in prostitution. If convicted of some of the most serious charges, he could face life in prison. So by the end of the proceedings yesterday, you had 45 prospective jurors secured for selection. And of that group, meaning what I'm saying is they're going to move forward to the next stage of the process when court resumes on Friday. Of that group, you're going to have 12 jurors who are selected and 6 alternates who are selected. There's going to be a combination of preemptory challenges from the prosecution and the defense to whittle that number down, but it's going to be interesting to see what ultimately happens because this selection process has delved into very sensitive topics. Each juror had to be asked whether they or someone close to them had experience with sexual assault, harassment, domestic violence, maybe they've been accused of crimes, and they've been quite transparent. At least that's what it seems to have been. They've been transparent about these issues. And this case, by the way, has evolved significantly over the past several months. The indictment has been amended multiple times. There have been several superseding indictments. Right now, we have the third superseding indictment in which Combs faces 5 criminal counts. 1 count of racketeering conspiracy, 2 counts of sex trafficking by force, fraud, or coercion, and 2 counts of transportation to engage in prostitution. Now, before we go any further into this and talk about what we can expect for tomorrow, I want to bring on our very own Law and Crime reporter, Elizabeth Millner, who is at the courthouse for jury selection. She is going to be there, by all accounts, every day of this trial, particularly next week when we think everything's going to start up. Good to see you. Thanks for taking the time before your life gets quite busy.
Of course.
So what were some of the highlights from this week of jury selection, and particularly when you were in the court?
Yeah, of course. I think the biggest highlight was just that everybody from all these different walks of life were inside that courtroom to pretty much be qualified to see whether or not that they can move into the next process as far as being an actual juror on this very, very high profile trial. I think some of the memorable moments for me were just one, the transparency amongst these prospective jurors. You know, they had to talk about, past trauma. They had to talk about where they had worked. They had to talk about their personal lives as far as whether or not they had kids, they're married. They had to talk about what type of publications and news outlets that they get their news from. They had to talk about, their social media habits, especially when it comes to this particular case. Like some of the prospective jurors did admit to, for example, doom scrolling, liking some posts that they perceived to be pretty funny, just about the case overall in general. Some people were very forthcoming as to whether or not they had seen any of the documentary. And surprisingly, a lot of these prospective jurors did say that they could be fair and impartial. And that's even including some who have even seen the CNN video, that of the 2016 Intercontinental Hotel of Diddy allegedly assaulting Cassie, and of course we have to still say allegedly and all of that sort. But as far as jury selection goes, I'm surprised at how quickly the process is going, because I remember on Monday speaking about it, I was like, no way can they get a jury seated in this week for this high profile of a trial. It was very efficient, exactly, from the moment that they brought in these jurors to the questions that they were asking. Even Diddy himself inside that courtroom seemed very involved as far as what type of jurors that he would particularly like to be on his case potentially, because again, they still have to dwindle that number down from 45 to 18. So they still have to knock off a lot of prospective jurors. Now, they're not going to be in court on Friday, but we still could get a very good glimpse as to who these 18 individuals will be, especially if they have to report back on Monday.
Hey, so look, I know a lot of you out there might be true crime fans, but are you also in a business of some kind? If so, let me tell you real quick about our sponsor, Odoo. Odoo is an incredible all-in-one business management software that provides you with a range of applications like their sales tool. The Kanban pipeline, game changer. Whether you're working with leads or full-blown opportunities, you can visually track every stage of your sales process. You just drag and drop to move deals forward. It's fast and honestly kind of satisfying. When it's time to send a quote, it's literally a couple of clicks. The reporting's super clear. You get a live view of your pipeline, conversions, what's working, so you can focus on closing and not guessing. Right now, you can get a free 15-day trial of Odoo's all-in-one business solution. See how it can make your life a little bit easier. Check it out at odoo.com/side Sidebar CRM. Weren't there some notable moments of questioning of jurors yesterday? Because talking about transparency, man, the first day when you were in court on Monday, you had a juror who basically said that they admitted to stealing a wand at the Harry Potter shop at Universal Studios. I was like, wow, this level of transparency. But yesterday, the final day of whittling down the number to 45 jurors was interesting too, right? What were some of the exchanges?
Well, I want to take it back actually a little bit to Tuesday. There was this one exchange between the judge and a prospective juror just about marijuana usage, and that, the judge asked this individual, whether or not if they could abide by an order not to smoke marijuana throughout the course and duration of this trial, which again is 2 months. It's a lot of time, and this jury is not going to be sequestered. So they'll have the opportunity to go home every single day, do what they normally do, pick up their lives, but also not be involved with the case or anything like that, not look it up, not do any research, anything like that. But pretty much what this prospective juror did tell the judge is that they didn't think that they could stop smoking marijuana. Essentially, the judge had like a little laughing moment about that, and this juror was ultimately dismissed because when it was asked, when was the last time you smoked, and this prospective juror said last night, had to report to jury duty the next morning. Exactly. They were just kind of like, no, let's not do that. Then I heard that there was one about Star Wars, and just like that they love Star Wars. There were some there were teachers there. There were prospective jurors who, one of the big questions was, have you had previous training with, sexual assault, sexual harassment? And surprisingly, a lot of people did have this type of experience because sometimes it just comes with the job that they had to complete or do. For example, on Monday, there was a massage therapist who had to go through sexual harassment and sexual assault training. And that's just part of the job. And, we're in different times now, than maybe 20 years ago, where this is just part of their duty to kind of have these types of trainings when it comes to their professions. And so it was really interesting to kind of see this whole process play out. And again, a lot of these jurors were very forthcoming just about, whether or not that they could, one, stop smoking weed during this type of trial, or two, just be transparent about, just some of the trainings that they had that might kind of relate to this case.
And I'll highlight a few. I mean, you had one juror who apparently attended the same high school as Sean Combs decades ago. Then you had this, and I'll read actually the exchange. Have you communicated to others, posted your opinion on social media or online, or liked any social media posts about Mr. Combs? And there's one juror who answered no, and the juror said, I mean, I have not. Like, I've seen stuff online, but I never posted anything about it. And the court says, do you remember retweeting, like a meme, maybe a joke about Mr. Combs? And the juror apparently replied, more likely than not, yes. Like, I probably liked a comment or something like that realistically. And the court said, is there a reason why you didn't mention that kind of thing, liking that kind of thing? The juror responded, I just think I took it a little bit too literal than like thinking of like Twitter or whatever. And the court said, like, in what way? I apologize because I don't really use social media, so you just got to help me out. And the juror said, I think realistically, it's more likely that I probably have. I might have just, I think with anything like doom scrolling, you don't even think about it. And that's what you're talking about with doom scrolling mindlessly. You had another candidate who said that they were fatigued from binge watching Star Wars Andor. So this is not a joke, admitting to skipping part of the jury questionnaire. When Judge Subramanian jokingly asked if he could focus, the man insisted he would, though prosecutors kind of expressed doubts about his personal discipline. He remained in the pool, however, but this was the exchange. I told you I was tired, man. When I came in here, I was tired. Court responded, why were you tired? Just to help me. Juror said, I have sleep apnea, and I kind of went to sleep late. I was binging on, catching up. What were you binging on? Let's see, what's the new one? The new Star Wars Andor just came out, so I was binging on it, so I fell asleep late. Let me ask you this. Are you on any kind of medication or any kind of treatment that would make it hard for you to concentrate during a trial? No, just stayed up late, and I was watching Andor. And the court responded, it's going to be long days with a lot of people talking, a lot of things coming up on the screens. Are you going to be able to concentrate and be well rested so you can be focused? I hope so. It highlights a question that I have about, from what you've seen in the jury selection process. Are these jurors want to even be there? I was talking with Ben Shu yesterday, who was Johnny Depp's lawyer. He said there were jurors who wanted to be on that case. I don't know if I'm feeling the same thing here. It's an 8-week trial, criminal trial. They're going to be going through difficult subject matter. Did you get the sense of anybody? I remember there's cases where they were excited to be on the jury. I mean, this is a big case. Did you get the sense anybody's excited?
Not necessarily excited, because I remember, when the judge brought in all these prospective jurors on Monday, that, the judge was pretty transparent. This trial is going to be lasting about 8 weeks, although for next week it's planning to be 9 to 5, and the following week and the weeks after it's planning to be 9 to 3. That's still a long amount of time to be sitting on a jury. I mean, that's 2 months of their lives that they'll have to be there, be present, be alert, kind of talk about all, or not talk about, excuse me, but they have to kind of listen to all this different testimony from all these various different witnesses, not just from the government side, but obviously the defense's side as well too. And so I remember when the judge particularly told these prospective jurors, hey, look, this is going to be a 2-month trial, and then one juror just shook their head, and so it seems like, I think maybe if the length was a little bit shorter, there might be a little more possibly excitement, if that's the right word to use for this. But for the most part, it seems like, I think it's the length of trial that has jurors a little apprehensive, but still for the most part, they seem to be taking the process pretty seriously.
And you even had a juror who knew the judge, who knew Judge Arun Subramanian, and worked together with him, right?
Yep, they worked together, and they this prospective juror had great things to say about Judge Subramanian, even though they said that they didn't agree on every single thing, but they said that the judge was fair, and that's something that I've particularly noticed being inside that courtroom, just how fair he is. Now, I will say something funny.
Yeah, he said fair, gregarious, decent, brilliant, but we have not always agreed on it. Yeah. He's dismissed.
Yes, he was dismissed for obvious reasons. But yeah, I actually kind of applaud Judge Subramanian because, one, this is a very high-profile case, but he doesn't seem to be necessarily just on the government side or necessarily on the defense's side. He seems to be giving wins and even losses to both sides. And so from what that prospective juror said, that seemed like a very accurate statement that Judge Subramanian is pretty fair.
So I'll get more into what we can expect with the jury selection process, but there's a big update regarding one of the alleged victims in this case. Can you talk to us about that? Because this person may not testify now, right? Talk to us about that.
Yeah, so this was kind of brought up on Monday at first. It was mentioned kind of towards the end of trial, and alleged victim 3 has been brought up before. Now, alleged victim 3, according to a court filing, initially was going to go by a pseudonym, but then in a court filing right before jury selection happened, the government said that victim 3 or alleged victim 3 was fine with testifying using her real name. But then that's why it was all the more of a surprise on Monday when the government said that they're trying to get a hold of her. They're trying to get a hold of her through her attorney, who is going through these unspecified personal issues. But pretty much she is part of, the racketeering conspiracy. The prosecution says that these allegations, Diddy allegedly trafficked 3 victims and forced a 4th victim into sexual activity with him. And according to the transcript, the defense actually wants an answer as to whether or not alleged victim 3 will be testifying by tomorrow. And so the government said that they can't get in touch with victim 3's lawyer, who's going through these personal issues, that they didn't really specify what was necessarily going on with them. But Maureen Comey, who's going to be the lead prosecutor there, she said she still doesn't have an update. They still haven't gotten in touch with her lawyer. Victim 3 was subpoenaed, but it's still unclear if she plans to actually appear in court, which is pretty huge. Do I think that the case can still proceed without alleged victim 3? The government thinks so. The defense, maybe not so much, but it seems that the judge kind of said, to the defense that they should proceed under the assumption that victim 3 will be testifying. So that's kind of open-ended right now, which is pretty startling given that this starts on Monday.
The best case scenario for the prosecution is she testifies, even if that means they have to restructure their case. So prosecutors are very, they're very deliberate in who they want to testify, at what point, what story they want to tell the jury. There could be, if victim 3 doesn't come forward until the end of the trial, that might shake things up a little bit. The worst thing is if the victim 3 doesn't testify for the case. But victim 3 is not a part of the sex trafficking counts or the transportation to engage in prostitution counts. That's alleged victim 1 and alleged victim 2. So it's interesting to see the role of alleged victim 3. Talk to me about what you anticipate for day 1 and for next week. I mean, in terms of the structure of the case, who we think might testify. Just give us a preview, because you're going to be in that courtroom for opening statements and beyond. What can we expect from next week?
We can expect fiery opening statements. Now, opening statements are pretty interesting because we've seen a bunch of trials, and for the most part, I don't think a lot of jurors actually remember opening statements by the time we get to closings, by the time they go into deliberations. But, that's the opening window for both sides to really kind of lay out their case. Obviously, we've got little inklings of what we believe that both sides are going to be saying. Obviously, the government has, the superseding indictments or the indictments on their sides. The defense is kind of painting it a little bit differently, that Diddy just lived an alternative lifestyle, which I think is a pretty interesting kind of way of going about this type of defense, given just the severity of these types of charges. But we'll see kind of how the defense delivers the opening statements. I'm kind of more interested to see how those opening statements go, honestly, as opposed to the government's opening statements. But I think both sides could be pretty fiery depending on kind of what comes out. As far as after opening statements go, though, the prosecution pretty much said that they do have witnesses ready to testify on Monday. And so they said that they're going to have 2 witnesses on Monday, but they believe that one of them is going to kind of still carry into all of Tuesday. So now whether or not that's going to be maybe a federal agent who conducted the raid, maybe that's possibly victim 1, who we presume to be Cassie Ventura, testifying. I imagine that the government is going to be wanting to put on a very important witness right after openings.
And alleged victim 1, and is there another alleged victim who are going to identify themselves publicly?
Well, it was going to be alleged victim 3.
Right, yeah. So because I think one of the things to look out for is so much of this case has been shrouded in secrecy and redactions.
Right.
Do you think in an opening statement, or at least by the end of Monday or the end midweek, we're going to know a lot more about these allegations against Combs? Because it is quite general at this point.
Yes, absolutely. I feel like they'll get into more specific details. I think they'll get into more graphic details. I think we'll really get a better understanding on Monday, really just what all the government has. And even with that being said, this is a type of trial and this is a type of case where anything can kind of be thrown, and we don't really know what to expect, which kind of makes it exciting, kind of makes it a little nerve-wracking, especially, if I was in Diddy's shoes, I'd be a little nervous to be going up against the federal government. Absolutely. And that was, I mentioned this on Monday too, that I was kind of surprised that he had kind of uttered that statement. And he said it very nonchalantly, like, I'm sorry, Your Honor, I'm a little nervous, while he was going to take a restroom break. But it was really just kind of an eye-opening statement to see or to hear, mainly because, for the most part, Diddy appeared upbeat, confident, and now it's kind of like, okay, it's all setting in that this is really happening. We're in jury selection process, we're dwindling it down, and then on Monday, openings are starting.
A lot of talk about celebrities. So there was a lot of mentions of celebrities this week. Do we have any sense of who's going to be named, who might be called as a witness in this case, or we just don't know that information? I mean, we kind of got a sense at the beginning of the week about what celebrities may be mentioned in the case in some fashion, some places that might be mentioned, but what their connection is to the case, still unclear. I mean, talk to us about that.
So a lot of these celebrities, they were mentioned during the people and places, and it was pretty much, are these prospective jurors familiar with these people? And so, we had everyone from Dallas Austin, who again is a music producer, Chance Combs, Christian Combs, family members of Diddy, obviously, Michelle Williams of Destiny's Child, you had Kanye West, you had Michael B. Jordan, you had Lauren London, Kid Cudi, Aubrey O'Day, Harve Pierre, who has been named in as a defendant in one of Diddy's civil lawsuits, but also he was from Making the Band. He had been the previous president of Bad Boy Records. You had Don Richard, who had also filed a civil claim against Diddy, it was pretty surprising that she had filed that civil suit against him, mainly because, she had worked with Diddy for a number of years. And then I think Diddy himself might have been surprised by it, because that statement that his legal representatives came out with was just like, this is somebody that I've been familiar with for 20 years. I consider this person a friend, etc. Another obviously famous name that was mentioned was Cassie Ventura, and who we again expect to be alleged victim number 1. And so obviously from her angle, we expect her to testify. I wouldn't be surprised if Don Richard testified, because I did see her lawyer, Lisa Bloom, inside court on Monday. As far as Michael B. Jordan, I believe that his reps kind of said that he's not going to be testifying in this case, which is sad to me. I'm a huge fan of Michael B. Jordan, but it kind of makes sense. And then I had mentioned on Monday that what the commonality is between between those two was that, not only did he date Lori Harvey, which Diddy also dated previously, but he also apparently was in a romantic relationship with Cassie as well, too. And so that kind of is the connection. The Mike Myers one is still kind of up in the air. Unsure a little bit how he kind of fits into this case. But, if people are going to be testifying and they're able to kind of put, famous faces in a room, where something may have allegedly happened or something like that. That kind of is what I'm expecting as far as why these celebrities were mentioned. Now, as far as will this laundry list of celebrities actually testify, that's a little unclear, but for the most part, that was kind of the big takeaways from these celebrity names.
And that's why I think a lot of people are going to have eyes on it. And unfortunately, there's no cameras in that court. When we do get transcripts, you're going to be our eyes and our ears. You're going to be our camera about what's happening in there. Talk to us about tomorrow. So you're headed back to court tomorrow. Also just tell us what the scene is like, right? What are you seeing there? How many people are out there? I'm sure it's going to be very different next week. And also, what are we going to expect from how both sides are going to whittle down the jury?
So from what I'm seeing inside that courtroom, it's a little more formal, I feel like. When I had first started going to court, it was really just Tenny Garagos and Mark Agnifilo representing Diddy, and now that number's dramatically increased. When I first started going to these hearings, Maureen Comey wasn't even on this case, and she's going to be the lead prosecutor now. As far as the defense goes, they've added a number of names to the defense defense attorney list, including like Alexandra Shapiro, Brian Steele, Xavier Thompson, Nicole Westmoreland. Mark Garagos is inside that courtroom kind of acting as a little bit of an advisor to the defense, which is interesting because the judge...
back and forth between him and the judge, too, on
exactly. That. And so, we'll kind of see how he kind of plays, he being Mark Garagos, kind of plays into the defense and, just kind of giving them tidbits and advice and stuff like that. But even from Diddy, he looks dramatically different from his pretrial hearings. He's not in the MDC jumpsuit. He's in a pretty much what I call kind of the Agnifilo special, where, everyone kind of looks like a schoolboy a little bit. He has a collared shirt, he has a pullover sweater, he has navy slacks, no belt, because obviously he's still a detainee, no laces on shoes per the judge's order. But even the marshals are dressed up, which I found pretty surprising. They're not in their normal uniforms, they're in an actual suit, kind of blending in. Like if you were a prospective juror, you might think they're one of the attorneys. So that's how formal everything has been since. Now, as far as even outside, the media presence is wild. I don't know if it'll be like that every single day of trial, but as far as opening statements, as far as probably Cassie testifying, closing statements, obviously the verdict, I expect just a large amount of people to be inside that courtroom. The family wasn't there for jury selection, but they're expected to be there reportedly throughout the duration of trial, which is a long time to be inside that courtroom. I'm kind of curious, will all of his children, including his daughters, be inside that courtroom, mainly because that's a lot of graphic detail to be listening to when you're especially young. These allegations have to do with your father. And so I'm interested to kind of see like what the family's reaction is to hearing the government side of the case in full detail, as we're kind of expecting to happen. And as far as tomorrow goes, I imagine they're going to dwindle it down. They're going to ask, the certain questions. Now, the jury's not going to be there. I have to kind of mention that. But I expect that both sides are going to really be dwindling it down. So as far as people who may have worked, in the media, for example, the HBO photo producer, I would be very surprised if she goes kind of to that final round.
Because the defense didn't like her.
They did not like her.
And the judge had made certain points during the course of the several days, save it for your peremptory challenges, which, by the way, just so everybody knows, these are challenges that you can make to strike a juror for no cause. Yes. So for whatever reason, it just can't be for gender or race or ethnicity, although I'm sure each side will accuse the other of doing that and violating it. But you can strike a juror if you believe they're biased or you think there's something there. You can strike that juror and then you whittle down that number.
So even people who may have made like social media posts, making fun of the defendant or anything like that, I expect that the defense is definitely going to want to dwindle them out, put them out as far as going to the next process, which is going to be sitting on that actual jury. So 45 to 18, it's all happening. It's going to be dwindled tomorrow and then openings on Monday, and that's the expectation. So we'll see what happens.
Elizabeth, thank you so much for coming on. I know we're going to do a sidebar tomorrow after you're in court as well. Really appreciate your great reporting on this, and thanks for coming on.
All right, thanks for having me.
And that is all we have for you right now here on Sidebar. Everybody, thank you so much for joining us. And as always, please subscribe on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you should get your podcasts. I'm Jesse Weber. I'll speak to you next time.